Hello everyone, I am the Benedict Kirby, and welcome to my channel, The Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews and other deck techs. On this episode of The Brewery, I'll be discussing my take on a Commander background pairing from Baldur's Gate, Volo Haunted One. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel. The best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. For just $1, patrons get early access to certain videos on YouTube. In fact, patrons got a chance to see this video earlier. You can also support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Volo is a 2/3 human wizard with choose a background for 2 generic and 1 blue. When he enters the battlefield, he creates a legendary artifact with hexproof called Volo's Journal. While the previous printing of Volo cares about creatures having no shared types whatsoever, the benefit of Volo's Journal is that you can choose a creature type not already noted for it, even if the creature cast has multiple types. So if a creature had 2 types, you can choose one to copy down with the journal, so long as it hasn't been noted down already. Thanks to this, I decided to chock my deck full of changelings, which we'll soon see. That way, I can choose absolutely any obscure creature type not already noted with the journal in order to maximize how many triggers I get. The reason being because we can pay 2 and tap down Volo in order to draw as many cards as creature types noted with Volo's journal. The amount of cards we draw off of this is insane. And since I am not only tapping down Volo for his ability, but also playing a ton of changelings, I chose Haunted One as Volo's background. While this commander combination seems random as hell, trust me, this deck absolutely slaps. We can respond to a board wipe by tapping down Volo to not only draw into a ton of cards, but by giving him and creatures that share a creature type with him, which is hopefully all of our creatures, undying until end of turn, returning from the board wipe with a +1/+1 counter no less. This is such an amazing deterrent against board wipes. Opponents would have to jump through a ton of hoops to wipe our board. Then, if no one attempted to, we can simply activate Volo at the beginning of the end step before ours to draw a ton of cards anyways. Super busted. While I'm not one to toot my own horn, I absolutely love this deck and am pretty proud of this idea. As I previously mentioned, we can run creatures with multiple creature types to make the most of Volo's Journal. So what better creatures than those with Changeling and all creature types? The deck's running Changeling Outcast, Ghostly Changeling, Littjara Kinseekers, Mistform Ultimus, Mistwalker, Moonglove Changeling, Skeletal Changeling, Turtleshell Changeling, Universal Automaton, and Venomous Changeling as changelings just for the sake of chalking the deck full of, well, changelings. These 10 changelings are literally included in the deck solely because they have all creature types. While some do have other abilities, their power is in the fact that they have all creature types. They will always trigger Volo's Journal, and they will always get all the boons from all the lords in the deck, which we'll soon see. As for the more useful changelings in the deck, Bloodline Pretender and Cairn Wanderer have the potential to become quite the beaters, especially Bloodline Pretender. While any changeling entered the battlefield will trigger it, I tend to choose Shapeshifter as the chosen creature type to be efficient. Cairn Wanderer has the potential of having quite the spicy keyword soup, which is great for when we can swing in for the win. Graveshifter is a Gravedigger with Changeling, which is great. While this might not be groundbreaking, being able to recover keylords can be crucial. Also, the deck has ways to bounce our creatures, which we'll soon see, so reusing this multiple times in a game is great. Orvar the All-Form is possibly the greatest changeling of all time, but unfortunately is here solely because it's a changeling. I was tempted to run cheap buyback spells just to make the most out of Orvar, but they ended up taking slots and wasn't worth the effort. Having Orvar as another changeling is good enough for this deck though. Shapesharer is an amazing changeling here since it can change any shapeshifter into any other creature. Since it's not limited to your own creatures, you can turn any changeling into an opponent's best creature, either for value or combat, since the effect lasts until the beginning of your next turn. Obviously, you can also copy your best creatures too, like the lords in the deck. This card is so amazing here. Moth-Dust Changeling is another good changeling, but probably not for what you'd think. Recall that Volo's background triggers whenever Volo's tapped, it doesn't matter how. So if we're tapped out, we can simply activate Moth-Dust Changeling by tapping down Volo in response to a board wipe. You'd be surprised just how many opponents overlook this detail. They only pay attention to your available mana since Volo's ability costs 2 to activate. Super sneaky. Amoeboid Changeling, the last changeling of the deck, is probably the most useful one though. While Volo will help all of our changelings survive a board wipe because they all share his creature types, that might not be the case for the rest of the creatures in the deck. In fact, 31% of the creatures in the deck don't share a type with Volo, most of them being the lords. But thanks to this changeling, we can tap it down in response to a board wipe before tapping down Volo. That way, Volo will gain all creature types and his background will thus count all of our creatures when it comes time to give them +2/+0 and Undying. This is so crucial that Amorphous Axe and Rune Stalactite are included in the deck. Naturally, these are meant to be equipped onto Volo for the same reasons as I just explained with Amiiboid Changeling. That being said, the best way to go about this is with Maskwood Nexus. With this on the battlefield, all of our creatures will have all creature types, and not just the ones on the battlefield either. While this is in fact subtle, it does matter sometimes, which you'll soon see. As a bonus, we can also activate it to create another Shapeshifter, which is yet another creature to benefit from all of the deck's lords. Same with Birthing Boughs. They are a bit costly to activate for a measly 2/2 Changeling, but if we have the mana to sink, it's definitely useful to grow our army, especially when we start amassing the lords. Reflections of Littjara is another way to amass changelings, and this one is actually free since it's a triggered ability. With Maskwood Nexus, makes it no matter what creature type we choose for the enchantment, the same is true for Mistform Ultimus and all of the deck's changelings. So regardless of the chosen type, it will trigger for all of them, giving us a copy of whatever changeling we cast. However, I always choose Fairy as a creature type since it is relevant for a key lord in the deck, while also still triggering off of the changelings. But I'll showcase which lords I have in the deck in a bit. While the changelings definitely help make the absolute most of Volo and his background, we can still do more. So let's see how we can further improve upon our combination in the command zone. Freed from the Reel and Penman's Aura are absolutely disgusting here. For just 1 blue mana, we can untap Volo when enchanted by either of them. So for 2 generic and 1 blue, we can activate Volo to draw into a ton of cards, and then have him untapped and ready for when we need to activate him to save our board. As a bonus, Penman's Aura also protects Volo by giving him Shroud for just 1 blue mana. Superman indeed. Holdout Settlement and Survivor's Encampment are some more cheeky ways to tap Volo along the same vein as Moth-Dust Changeling. Opponents are probably going to be more aware of these though, since they are lands. So while Volo costs 2 generic to activate, if just one of these is untapped, an opponent might ask which land you do have untapped and then figure it out. Hopefully they don't, but at least these cards don't take up a slot in the deck for being lands. And yes, I have caught opponents off guard with these, but that only ends up happening once, and then they get the gist of it and become paranoid the rest of the game. So that's always fun. Rogue's Passage is another way to help tap down Volo while also helping potentially get the win. Keep in mind that not only does Volo's background give our matching creatures Undying, but +2/+0 as well. So if we make Volo unblockable, we can attack with him no problem in our attempt to pump our army of boosted changelings for the potential win. But we'll see more of that later. The most important thing is that this doesn't take up a slot in the deck and can help us close out games. Erratic Portal and Crystal Shard are the synergistic tech pieces that I mentioned earlier. With these, we can bounce a generic changeling in order to be able to recast it and thus re-trigger Volo's Journal. There are 3 1-costed changelings and 3 2-costed changelings, so those are ideally the best ones. Either way, we can also use these as instant speed ways to protect a key creature in a pinch since we can bounce it to our hand. However, the main use is to re-trigger Volo's Journal as often as possible. Let me take a moment to put it into perspective, so you can see just how powerful it is to run so many changelings with Volo Itinerant Scholar. Here's the list of creature types as of Baldur's Gate per Rule 205.3m. Since it's literally a rule, you can have this list out while you're playing and it's not cheating. So each time you cast a changeling, choose the most obscure and rare creature type in order, obviously omitting the ones on cards actually in your deck and ones you already wrote down. For example, I always start with Advisor, Etherborn, Antelope, Ape, etc. because I know those aren't tribes printed on non-changeling creatures in my deck. Trust me, the list gets out of hand very quickly, so you will need all the help you can get. Once again, that rule you can reference throughout the game is CR 205.3m. Knowledge is power, and this is the power at the core of the deck. Keep it at hand. Going back to the synergy with the deck's commander combo is also making the most of Volo's background. Cauldron of Souls and Thief of Blood do just that. The Cauldron can be tapped to give our creatures Persist, which is similar to Undying, but actually cancels out its downside. For example, if we already used Haunted One to recover from a board wipe, our creatures having those +1/+1 counters will prevent them from being resurrected a second time. However, if they had Persist, that's different. They get a -1/-1 counter instead. This can then cancel out the +1/+1 counters and vice versa. For example, if we already tapped Volo to give our creatures Undying with Haunted One, the next time we'd fall victim to a board wipe, we just use Cauldron of Souls instead, since Persist cares about -1/-1 counters instead. So we can alternate between Persist and Undying to essentially have an immortal army. Thief of Blood removes all counters from permanents when it enters the battlefield. If our creatures don't have either +1/+1 nor -1/-1 counters, it's essentially another way to give us another opportunity to survive a board wipe. If we can then bounce this Thief of Blood to our hand with either Erratic Portal or Crystal Shard, we're golden. Now, while I keep mentioning surviving board wipes, that's not necessarily tied to our opponent's board wipes. I'm still running cards like Damnation, Crux of Fate, and Bantu's Last Reckoning. If anyone's board is more dangerous than ours, we can just wipe the board ourselves while giving our creatures Undying in response. That way, we're the only ones with a board to then aggro out the next turn if possible. So keep that in mind. We have the potential to be super evil. Alright, now for the final section of Synergy, the Lords of the deck. When first brewing the deck, I was brainstorming as to what the best lords would be. I narrowed that down to interaction, card advantage, and mana acceleration. While the deck can still draw into a ton of cards, it's also tied to the ability that saves our board. So I included ways to draw cards as well as protect our board in order to make the most of these slots. Same with mana acceleration, especially since the deck is in green. The other slots were then used for some interesting lords that work really well in the deck. So let's start with Lord of the Unreal and Sign of Una, the most important ones. These give our changelings Hexproof and Shroud respectively. Unfortunately, while the fairy can't affect itself, Lord of the Unreal can if it was also an illusion, which is possible when it has all creature types. Sign of Una is the reason why I choose fairy each time I play Reflections of Littjara. If it clones itself when cast, then you'll have 2 of them on the battlefield, so each one will protect the other by giving themselves Shroud along with our changelings. If Volo also had all creature types, then flashing in Sign of Una in response to a targeted effect is definitely a pro gamer move. At least Volo will include Lord of the Unreal for the Undying effect of his background since it shares creature types already by default, so that's a huge bonus. For card advantage, I have Azami Lady of Scrolls, Seagate Lore Master, and Yuriko the Tiger's Shadow. Of these, Azami is obviously the better one. All we have to do is tap down a changeling in order to draw a card. However, there are still wizard creatures by default in the deck, most prominently Volo. So Azami is yet another way to be able to tap down Volo for free in a pinch in order to give our creatures Undying. So along with Lord of the Unreal and Sign of Una, Azami is one of the most important lords here. Seagate Lore Master will draw us into an insane amount of cards, pretty obviously how and why. Yuriko is interesting card advantage because she requires our changelings and default ninjas to deal combat damage to a player. However, when we do, we're not really drawing cards, which is great because it bypasses any detrimental triggers opponents might control when we do. Looking at you, Smothering Tithe. So not only that, but it also serves as a way to kill off opponents since we're hitting the table for life loss each time we do. Also, more importantly for all 3 of these creatures is the fact that they share printed creature types with Volo. So by default, they'll be included with Haunted One when Volo is tapped down, even if he doesn't have all creature types, which is a huge bonus. The Scarab God is also sort of in this category even though it doesn't draw us cards per se. But the amount of cards we scry through in our upkeep is so vast that we're nigh tutoring at that point. However, best of all, it's similar to Yuriko in being yet another way to incidentally hit the entire table for a lot of life loss as well. Not only that, but we can also use it to copy creatures from graveyards when we exile them. They are zombies, which further synergizes with its first ability. Also, while it doesn't share a creature type with Volo, it doesn't matter if it dies since it just goes back to our hand at the beginning of the next end step. As for mana acceleration, I'm running Prosperous Thief, Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator, and Barakos Party Leader. With the first 2, we have to spread the love and hit as many opponents as possible in order to create as many treasure tokens as possible. While the Thief and Yuriko have ninjutsu, I don't really cheat them in since that won't trigger Volo's journal. So when I play these, I usually choose 1 creature type for each one, so I get the trigger for human and 1 for ninja. Barakos will almost always happen to trigger since we'll more than likely have a complete party thanks to all of the changelings we should have in play by then. It also counts itself, so we just need 2 more changelings since Volo fits the wizard role. So when we attack with Barakos, we can create 4 treasures as well as having the depending player lose 4 life upon attack. For interaction, I have Captivating Vampire and Hithonia the Cruel. What better way to remove a problematic creature than to just steal it? All we have to do is tap it down along with 4 changelings and we steal a creature. Not only that, but the stolen creature also becomes a vampire to further assist in stealing other creatures. It also gives our changelings +1/+1 as a bonus. Hithonia is another board wipe in creature form. Albeit very high costed for 8 mana, we have a one-sided board wipe, which means the difference between winning and not winning in the endgame. Gorgon is such a rare creature type, I highly doubt any of your opponent's creatures will survive it becoming monstrous. Cavern of Souls is technically another interactive lord effect since it protects our creature spells from being countered, specifically the ones with the chosen creature type. Again, it doesn't matter which creature type you choose for since it'll work for all changelings, but I tend to choose wizard because most of the non-changelings in the deck are wizards, and these wizards also happen to be lords, apart from the fact that Volo is also a wizard. It's a bit pricey in the secondary market, so you don't need to include it for the deck to run if you can't afford it, don't already have it, or aren't going to proxy it. In a similar vein, Secluded Courtyard and Unclaimed Territory are also included. These don't take up slots in the deck and can be used as lands that can tap down for any colors while not entering tapped. These are 100% unnecessary for the deck to run, but I have them because, well, why not? They're super cheap and it is my deck, so I can build it however I want to after all. As for interesting lords, I included Grell Philosopher. As a bonus, it's also a wizard which helps Barakos and counts for Haunted One with Volo. Since our changelings aren't doing much apart from accelerating the deck until we get our lords online, this helps our changelings have whatever activated abilities our opponents have on their creatures. Mana Dorks to accelerate our game plan? Don't mind if I do. Removal effects? Hell yeah. This is one of those cookie cards that makes your creatures as good as your opponents, which is super fun. The final lords in the deck are Slivers. Hibernation Sliver, Crypt Sliver, Shifting Sliver, and Siphon Sliver. If you do like this deck idea, I was also toying with the idea of a blue-black Sliver tribal deck with Volo Haunted One as the commander background combination, peppered with the best changelings. However, I went with this version instead since it ended up being the most fun, for me at least. But if you are interested in that blue-black Sliver tribal build with this commander combination, let me know in the comments and I'll post a link to it like I did with the alternate builds for Medium Sentinel Worm. That being said, these are the best slivers I considered for the deck. Hibernation Sliver being the most busted because it gives all the changelings a built-in way to self-bounce for no mana. Meaning that if we want to keep triggering Volo's Journal, I can pay 2 life and bounce the changeling. This can also help save any other creature in a pinch as well as we manage to give it all creature types. This sliver is super busted here. Crypt Sliver is another amazing sliver since you can just tap down a changeling to regenerate itself. This means that if our opponent's board wipe is damage based or doesn't prevent regeneration, we can simply tap down each creature in response in order to have it regenerate itself instead of using our Undying effect from Haunted One. Super powerful. Shifting Sliver is another busted lord here. It essentially makes our army unblockable unless you are facing another Sliver tribal deck. If you do, then just wipe the board first. In any case, more often than not, this makes your board unblockable. The deck does a lot of interesting things, but its main win con is swinging in with an army of changelings. This makes that way easier. Lastly, Siphon Sliver giving our board lifelink is more relevant than you'd think, especially when we're using our life to bounce our changelings once we have Hibernation Sliver. So these two in tandem do an insane amount of work. Another card that does an insane amount of work is Pyre of Heroes. The deck is running changelings with mana values from 1 to 5, along with ways to create tokens with changeling, counting for that 0 CMC. This means that we can sacrifice any of these changelings in order to birthing pod directly into play any other non-changeling creature from our library. We can sacrifice a token to get any of the 1-drop changelings from the deck to abuse the bouncing effects for cheap. But more importantly, we can turn those generic changelings into lords, particularly Lord of the Real, Scion of Una, Hibernation Sliver, Azami, etc. Best of all, since our more expensive creatures are 6 drops, we can still get them out since our most expensive changelings cost 5. So we can have one at the ready to get Thief of Blood to remove all counters, or even Hythonia to begin the endgame. This card is so busted here. So much so that Tesseret the Seeker is included for good measure. Tesseret is still amazing because we can also use him to get Maskwood Nexus, any of the bouncing artifacts, or the aforementioned Pyre of Heroes. Not only that, but with his +1 ability, we can untap Pyre of Hero along with some mana rock like Soul Ring to activate it a second time in the same turn. So good. Speaking of Soul Ring, the following cards in the deck are the essential card advantage, responses, and mana acceleration of any deck. As for interaction, the deck's running Swan Song, An Offer You Can't Refuse, and Fierce Guardianship. The deck is blue after all. While the deck doesn't have any apparent weaknesses in terms of archetypes, the deck isn't fast anytime soon, so it will bend to combo decks. So a couple of well-timed counterspells can stop us from losing by stopping the combo player from comboing off. Cyclonic Rift is another advantage of being blue. Fast horde decks are also a problem, but overloading a Cyclonic Rift is laughing in the face of those token strategies, as well as those that cheat huge permanents onto the battlefield. Mystic Sanctuary and Witch's Cottage are included because they don't take up slots in the deck, and they're also fetchable at instant speed if you want that pro gamer move. These are pretty self-explanatory recovery pieces and should definitely be included. Elixir of Immortality is included for those matchups against anti-creature decks. Since we are drawing into a ton of cards, sometimes it's good to have a huge graveyard to shuffle back in so as to not deck ourselves. In fact, Thought Vessel, Decanter of Endless Water, and Reliquary Tower are included due to how many cards we're drawing. The tower doesn't take up a slot in the deck for being a land, and the mana rocks are much appreciated since it's not a green deck and we need all the help we can in terms of mana acceleration. That being said, Sword of the Animus, Sword of Hearth and Home, and Wayfarer's Bauble are included as the deck's land-based ramp effects. The Bauble is a one-time only affair, but at least we can do this on curve if we manage to get it on our opening hand. The swords are amazing because we can potentially ramp a basic land each combat step. The deck is running 6 of each basic land to make the most of these effects. Keep in mind that if all else, we have Tesseret to fetch for them if we're 2 behind, or for when we've already gotten our best artifacts. Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Dimir Signet, Talisman of Dominance, and Felwar Stone are naturally included. Thought Vessel and Decanter of Endless Water can't be the only mana rocks in the deck, so we might as well run the best 2-costed ones in our colors. That being said, you could also run Jeweled Lotus if you wanted to, since it can help cast either Volo or Haunted One all on its own as early as turn 1. The rest of the deck is just the rest of the lands. The deck's running all 7 fetch lands, Watery Grave, Sunken Hollow, Fetid Pools, Ice Tunnel, Command Tower, and Ancient Tomb, as well as 6 of each basic land, as previously mentioned, to make the most of the basic land ramp effects in the deck. As with all of my deck techs, you can build your mana base according to your budget. Whether you include more expensive cards or even cheaper cards is up to you. You do you. This brew is just an idea of how to build around a Volo Itinerant Scholar. While you could definitely pair him with absolutely any background you want, admittedly, this one seems to stray way beyond the beaten path to say the least. While some of the first episodes for Baldur's Gate have showcased common and obvious pairings, hopefully this one brings an interesting take on something that you might have never thought of. If you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. Keep in mind that if you want to see the Sliver tribal version of this deck, let me know in the comments. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons of the Brewers for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link, that also helps out the channel. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of the Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am the Medic Kirby, and happy brewing.